Hey everybody, Bob Ross, chill, happy trees. Hello. So I can't remember if I did a weekly video or not, but I decided that because of something recently that happened to me, I would do another one. So what I'd like to talk about is psychotic episodes or psychosis. And the reason why I would like to talk about that is because with borderline personality disorder, psychosis and psychotic episodes are heavily under talked about. And the reason why is because a lot of people assume that because borderline personality disorder, since it's a personality disorder and not an emotional disorder, technically, um, a lot of people don't realize that we experience psychosis. Um, because it's a personality disorder. So, yay. Um, Dissociation and splitting is actually a form of psychosis when you really think about it. During splitting, there's everything or everyone is good or everything and everyone is bad. And when that kind of thinking is happening, we're not usually aware that it is happening unless you're getting treatment. And with that kind of black and white thinking, it can enhance paranoia. It can cause severe mood swings. It can cause memory issues, easy distraction. I mean, those are literally the symptoms of a manic episode or bipolar disorder. So, with mania being considered partially psychotic, it stands to reason that people with borderline personality disorder suffer from psychosis as well. So for me, I actually experienced psychosis yesterday. Ooh, it was trippy. And I actually experienced it like a few days ago too, but I'll get into that a little later. So yesterday, what happened is towards the end of my shift, I had like an hour left. I decided to sit down and chill after all the work I did because I was the only person on campus. I did have a substitute come in and help me for about 3.5 hours, but I mean, still, to do an entire school campus with trash and bathrooms, it's exhausting. And on top of it, I gotta lock everything. Which, I mean, I lock everything every day anyway, but like, I usually have at least one worker that's helping me with half of the school. So I was tired and I decided, you know what? I'm not going to do anymore. I'm just going to sit and chill. So I decided to go on the computer and just kind of check up on the news for the schools. You know, we're in the midst of possibly getting a new superintendent. Principals are moving around and retiring. So it's like, let me get into the loop and see what's going on. Well, before you know it, I delve. Excuse me, I haven't had my coffee yet. I delve so deep into the internet that I essentially dissociated for a whole hour. It was like 9 p.m., and then before you know it, it's 10 p.m., and it felt like 15 minutes. It was the weirdest thing. And then after I clocked out and secured the school's security alarm, I went into my husband's car. But as I was walking to my husband's car, I was like, where am I? Who am I? What is my purpose here? Where am I going? Where am I walking? And that's when I realized, oh shit, this is psychosis. um, there's a part of me that was kind of aware of what was going on. Very, very tiny sliver. And I was like, okay, this isn't unusual. I've experienced this before. What I need to do is just kind of pamper myself for tonight. So I decided to go to the grocery store, buy myself a new body wash, buy myself a new shower loofah and a lotion, and then I was good for the rest of the night. And then eventually, the psychosis, it just kind of I rode the wave, it was gone, the wave was done. You know, I mean that's essentially all you can do. So that was my psychotic episode yesterday. And then a few days before, I also had one, and this one was waking up in the middle of the night, which I have been doing recently. It's weird. I woke up at like, I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 a.m., somewhere around there. And as I'm laying in bed, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my purpose was, even though I'm literally laying in bed trying to sleep. I mean, that is the purpose. But, like, when you're experiencing psychosis, you just kind of think things in a different way. I thought I was in a different part of my room, in a different orientation, and on top of it, I felt like I was floating above my body. It was the weirdest thing. I felt so disoriented. It was ridiculous. Um, Eventually, I had to turn on my phone light and just look around me, and I was like, oh, okay, this is where I'm at. It was weird. The first ever psychotic episode I ever had, I didn't recognize until I actually looked it up on Google. I know you're not supposed to look up your symptoms on Google, but it's just so much cheaper than seeing a doctor. I mean, let's all be real here. The internet is free. That's why we go on there. It's the worst thing you can do, but sometimes it helps. Sometimes it helps. The first time I experienced a psychotic episode, I was working in a different school. I believe it was 2019. One day, and I was on like 40 milligrams of Geodon at night, which is an antipsychotic. Think about going back on it, but I'm not sure. And it helped for a while, but for some reason it just stopped working. And I think what happened was I built a tolerance to it. Really, what I should have done was just upped my dose, but you know, psychiatry. What happened was, and I am gonna get into details on what psychotic episodes are in a minute. I'm just sharing my experience so I can see if anybody relates or not. Essentially what happened was is I woke up in the morning, like around 10 a.m. like I usually do, and I had like this sense of just disconnect. Like I wasn't aware of who I was. I wasn't aware of what I was going to do, where I was going to go, what I was doing here. It was the strangest feeling. Like it was my first ever psychotic episode, and I was just like, "What the fuck is going on?" like, like why do I feel this way? You know, I was so unsure of my environment and myself. I felt like an Alzheimer's patient who didn't know where they were. It was frightening. But then I thought, okay, well, maybe I just need some coffee, and maybe, you know, then I'll be able to figure out all of these questions that I have about myself. So I got up, I drank some coffee, and I was sitting on the couch, and I was just like, man, I seriously don't know where I'm at. And then I thought to myself, okay, maybe today would be a good day to call off of work. But there was one problem with that. Where do I work? Who's my boss? Like, I literally couldn't remember anything about myself. It was fucking scary. So finally I was like, okay, maybe if I just roll through my contacts on my phone, I might be able to figure this out. So I grabbed my phone, I'm rolling through it, and I'm like, oh, there's my boss. That's the name of my boss. I recognize that. So I called, and I tried to call off of work that day, but see, employers can be so skeezy. This is what my employer did. He decided to not answer the phone even after I called multiple times. It's like, I know what you're doing, dude. You're trying to ignore my call so that way I feel forced to go to work. And he wouldn't accept text messages or voicemails. So it was like, God damn it, I have to go into work because he won't answer. So I decided, okay, I need to muster up the courage to go to work. I gotta try to get to work. I don't remember how to get to work. Like, So I'm like, okay, Google Maps, right? I googled my workplace, and there it was, and I was like, oh, okay, I kind of remember how to get to work. And at the time, I took 2 buses to get there. Um, and I got on the first bus, and I was just disoriented as hell. I didn't know where the hell I was going. I didn't recognize any of the road signs. It was surreal. Like, it was absolutely surreal. And then, thankfully for Google Maps, I figured out what the second bus was, managed to get on that, and then when I got to the school I was working at, I was like, oh, yes, rings a bell. This is where I'm going. So I get there, and I had a brief moment of clarity. I was like, okay, I'm a custodian. I'm here. This is what I do for a living. I have somewhat of an idea why I'm here. I know who that person is. I know who that person is. I'm starting to recognize my surroundings. And I'm like, okay, this is whatever this is going to go away. And then it got worse. I went through the entire shift, dizzy as all hell. I couldn't remember where my assignment was. I mean, it was absurd. And finally, throughout my entire shift, while being able to somewhat recognize where my assignment was and such, I finally got my work done. It was around 9 p.m. And what happened is I started to feel very anxious. Looking back on it, I'm pretty sure it was psychosis with a panic attack, but I thought it was a manic episode, not realizing that I actually had borderline personality disorder. They get confused with each other very easily. And I started to feel scared, like massively scared. And I felt like something was coming after me. I felt like a deer that was running in a forest away from a tiger. It was ridiculous. Like, I felt like something was chasing after me. And I got so scared that I almost urinated myself. Like, and I started to cry. But then I thought, okay, I'm just not feeling good today. Maybe tomorrow will be a better day. Just gonna muster up the courage to finish the shift, right? Well, then I started seeing shadow people. And they were kind of like in the corner of my eye. I wasn't really seeing them in front of me. They just seemed like flashes of like shadow people. It's kind of like when you have mice inside your home. You don't see the mice just standing there because they're afraid of, well, practically everything around them. You see them just dart. And that's what the shadow figures were like. They were just darting. And I was like, okay, well, it's dark. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. They weren't. And then this is the one that freaked me the fuck out. This was the one factor that made me decide to go to the hospital. I heard children laughing. And it wasn't like a ha 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 ha, right? Like kind of like a, happy-go-lucky laugh. No, it was a and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, to make matters worse, it sounded like toddlers laughing, like evil little demonic toddlers laughing. But I'm in a high school and it's 9 p.m. I should not hear children laughing. Like, so that was when I was like, oh shit, I need to go to the hospital. So I called my husband, and I was like in tears, and I was like, I'm experiencing this, I'm hearing this, I don't know what's going on, I've been feeling this way all day. And my husband's like, you need to go to the hospital. Well, thankfully there was a hospital that was less than 1 mile away, and they had a behavioral unit, so I got really lucky with that. I ended up going into the hospital, and they took me in and they chalked it up as a manic episode. Now, in another video, I'll talk about my experience being um, mentally taken for the first time, and it's actually not as bad as everybody thinks it is. But anyway, psychotic episode. So they placed me on a different antipsychotic. That was also the first time I was placed on Lamictal, which is a mood stabilizer, and essentially those things really helped. And then I was released, and I didn't really experience a psychotic episode for a while. So, what are psychotic episodes? Well, what is psychosis? Well, essentially, you become kind of brain dead. Usually, it takes in the form of not knowing where you are, not knowing who you are. Um, you feel very disoriented. You can feel like you're floating out of your body. And then there's hallucinations. Hallucinations can come in all sorts of forms. Most common ones are visual hallucinations, which is where you see things that aren't there. There's also auditory hallucinations, where you hear things that aren't there. Some people get tactile hallucinations, which is where you think you feel something all over your skin. A lot of people that have tactile hallucinations feel like they have bugs crawling all over them, and I have experienced that before, and it's not fun. But thankfully for me, it doesn't last too long, and it seldom occurs. But I have had it before. Um, some people have smell hallucinations. I've had those myself. A lot of people say they smell fire or they smell cigarette smoke. Cigarette smoke is like a big one. Some people smell burning toast, or they will smell pancakes or waffles, or anything that isn't there. I've had friends that smell grass inside of their house, and they don't have any grass in their house. Some people will smell weed, and it's not anywhere to be found. They're not a weed smoker. They don't have roommates, and they'll just smell it out of the blue, and they live alone. So, some people smell car gasoline. It's amazing, like all of the different smells you can, encounter when you're having nozzle hallucinations. Some people have taste hallucinations. They think they taste cake, or they think they're tasting charcoal or mud, or anything of that nature. Hallucinations can come in all sorts of forms. You also can feel like different bodily associations. You can become very dizzy. You can feel like you're floating out of your body. You can feel your limbs just kind of disoriented. I like to think of it as like noodle arm and legs. Like, your hand is like, my hand is holding this cup of coffee. I'm aware my hand is holding this cup of coffee. But with psychosis, you're just like, like, you can't feel your hands, you can't feel your legs, you can't feel your feet. You're out of it. Some people experience catatonia, which isn't very common with borderline personality disorder. That's very common with schizophrenia. And essentially what happens is you become like this. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. You're just sitting there, and you don't respond to your environment at all. And usually when people experience that, that's when they take the trip to the hospital because something ain't right. So, I personally feel that with borderline personality disorder, psychosis gets heavily under talked about. And I have joined many groups on Facebook and have asked, in the chats, hey, has anybody ever experienced psychosis? And I will get a ton of yeses. The internet, from what I've looked at for the statistics, on a lot of websites, they, exclaim that people with borderline personality disorder, only 15% experiences psychosis. And it's like, it's got to be higher than that. It's got to be higher than that. It's not something that's heavily talked about that I really think the community should recognize. And I think what the problem is that the stigma for borderline personality disorder is just so vastly high that psychosis just gets underlooked at. And part of the problem is when you go to a hospital, um, with borderline personality disorder, you almost have to tread lightly on telling the psychiatrist that's admitting you that you have borderline personality disorder, because there have been moments where people with borderline personality disorder have gotten turned away from the hospital from getting treatment. They've been turned away. The hospital is just like, yeah, your condition's untreatable. Bye. Can't help you. And it's like, well, this person's literally experiencing psychosis from their disorder, and you're just going to let them go? That's not right. So, what should you do if you're experiencing psychosis? Well, you have several options. You can either try to ride out the wave, like I did. Um, Highly recommend that if you do, you have a support system around you that is aware of what's going on. I personally, will start calling my husband and saying, hey, I'm experiencing this. Can you do like a little, I don't know, every 30-minute check on me? And they don't have to physically be there. You can just simply have them give you a phone call, or you can have them give you a text. Some people just don't feel comfortable going to the hospital, so they'd rather have a loved one just kind of observe and watch over them. Now, my recommendation is go to the hospital. Because the hospital is there for a reason, and there are medications that can treat this kind of thing. And thus, you don't want the psychotic episode to get worse. What can happen during a psychotic episode or psychosis is that you can essentially harm yourself, harm others, or potentially attempt or commit suicide. Psychosis is a very dangerous thing to mess with. Now, if you are aware that you're having one and you decide to ride the wave, that's entirely your choice. And I'm sure that if you've implemented, a crisis intervention of some kind to do it on your own, perhaps you could successfully not go to the hospital. But you're going to want to tell your psychiatrist about it, so that way it doesn't happen again. Because you don't want it to happen again. You don't want to experience these episodes over and over again. Because if you do, like I said, it can get worse. Now, you go to the hospital, you have borderline personality disorder, and you're having psychosis. Don't tell them that you have borderline personality disorder. I know that sounds like a very irrational piece of advice, but honestly, with as high as the stigma is, it's just best not to tell them. What you want to do is you want to walk in and you want to say, hey, I would like to be voluntarily admitted for psychosis because this, and this is what I'm experiencing. Now, once you get admitted, tell them which medications you're willing to try. And if they decide to put you on one because they feel that it would benefit you most, give it a shot. Because who knows? It might work. And if it works, hooray! And then when you leave, contact the psychiatrist that's currently treating you, that knows you have borderline personality disorder. Do a follow-up and say, hey, this is what they placed me on. Do you think that this is going to be effective? Now, the reason why you don't want to tell them that the reason why you don't want to tell the hospital that you have borderline personality disorder is so that you can be admitted, be observed, be in a safe environment, and you could potentially get the treatment that you need. You will have a much more less chance of being turned away. Um, I don't usually condone lying to medical professionals, but with the stigma that's associated with borderline personality disorder, it could potentially play in your favor if you lie. I mean, that's just the truth of it. It sucks. It really does, but you gotta do what you gotta do. So, if you currently have a psychiatrist, do a follow up and let them know what's going on. If you think you can ride the psychotic episode wave, then go ahead and do so. But contact your doctor immediately. Tell them what is going on. Tell them what you experienced. And with them being much more open minded, diagnosing you and treating you, they could much more likely give you the treatment that you need. Not that the hospital, can't treat you if you lied to them, but it doesn't hurt to let your doctor know, because those things are not supposed to happen. So, if you have experienced a psychotic episode or psychosis, or you think you might have experienced psychosis or a psychotic episode and you feel comfortable, please share in the comments. I mean, we're a community. We're here for each other, or at least we're supposed to be. And maybe advice can be given. Some people have tried different medications and it's worked. Some people have tried other medications and it's worked. You never know. You might get advice on which ones to try that might potentially work for you. Some people also have more tips than what I provided on how to handle them. So anyway, my next video will be about the first time I was Baker acted. Oh, what a time that was. I might even include the second time too. But yeah, that's the plan. If there's any other topics you guys want me to share, feel free to let me know. I am an open book. I am willing to share anything. If it's something I don't know, I am willing to do vigorous research on it and to give you an answer, because I want to break the stigma and I want to provide answers to those that are seeking. So I would like to try to be a guide light in these very, very hard, unsure times. I'm going to try, and I won't quit. Anyway, say goodbye to Bob Russ. Ta-ta.